My family kicked me out on my birthday, and now they're trying to say my new place is somehow a family asset? Hey there, I'm Casey. And let me tell you, this is one hell of a story. I'm 27 years old, and lately, life's been throwing punches left and right. I've got a job as a marketing assistant, not exactly glamorous, I know. But hey, it helps cover some of the bills. Not all of them, but enough to get by. I was living with my parents and my younger brother, James, in this rundown little house. It's a tight squeeze, falling apart in places, and always has this weird musty smell hanging around. Still, it was home, or at least I used to think so. Now let me just say, I wasn't freeloading. I put in my fair share. I was covering a good chunk of the household bills, doing the grocery shopping, and fixing stuff whenever something broke down. You'd think I'd get a little credit for all that, right? But nope. Not even close. Every time I stepped into the room, I'd hear my mom, Linda, laying into me like I was some kind of loser. "Casey, when are you gonna get a real job?" she'd say. That was her favorite thing to throw at me. And I still don't know what she meant by real job. I mean, I work my tail off every day. Davideting ain't a walk in the park. But in her mind, if you're not wearing a white coat or carrying a briefcase, it doesn't count for much. Any time I tried to stand up for myself, the comeback was always the same. "If it was a real job, you'd have your own place by now." Sure, Mom. Thanks for the support. Then there's James, my brother, just a year younger at 26. We've never exactly been tight. He walks around like he's better than me just 'cause he's got a bunch of followers on social media or whatever. The guy barely helps out around the house. Guess who picks up the slack every time? Yeah, that'd be me. Think anyone says thanks or even notices? Not a chance. Anyway, my 28th birthday was coming up, and even with everything going on, I was actually looking forward to it. I know, it sounds naive. But I had this little hope that maybe this year, things might be different. I'd saved up and bought myself a cake from this fancy bakery downtown, really splurged a bit. I pictured us having a quiet little celebration, just the four of us. Nothing wild, just a bit of cake, maybe a laugh or two. For once, I thought maybe they'd show they cared, even just a little. So a few days before the big day, I sat down with my parents, Mom and Dad David, to talk it over. "Hey," I said, trying not to sound too hopeful. "I was thinking we could do something for my birthday this weekend. You know, hang out a bit, have some cake." Mom didn't even look up from the magazine in her lap. "We'll see, Casey. We might have plans." Plans? On my birthday? Something about that didn't sit right, but I didn't want to jump to conclusions. I mean, I've lived in that house my whole life. I work hard, I help out. Why would they have plans that didn't include me? Fast forward to the big day. I was actually feeling pretty good. Went to work, got a bunch of birthday messages from coworkers, even bought myself a new outfit. It felt like maybe, just maybe, the day was going to turn out okay. I figured I'd come home to some kind of surprise, maybe a little card, maybe they saved me a slice of cake, something. But the second I pulled into the driveway, my stomach twisted. All my stuff was piled up on the front lawn. Boxes, bags, clothes, books, everything I owned was just dumped out there like garbage. I jumped out of the car, heart pounding, and ran up to the porch. And there they were, Mom, Dad, and James, just standing there, looking at me like they were holding some weird family intervention. My brain couldn't catch up with what was happening. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice shaking even though I tried to stay calm. Mom stepped forward with this cold, empty look on her face. "Casey, it's time for you to move out. You're not welcome here anymore." I just stood there, frozen. Like, I couldn't even wrap my head around it. Move out? On my birthday? Was this some sick joke? I looked over at Dad, hoping he'd step up and say something, anything. But he just stared at the ground, hands stuffed in his pockets like he didn't even have the guts to look at me. Anger and confusion hit me all at once. "But it's my birthday! Where am I supposed to go?" I hated how desperate I sounded, but I couldn't help it. Then James chimed in with that smug grin that made me want to snap. "Maybe you should have thought about that before being a burden all these years." A burden? Me? I was the one paying for groceries, bills, and repairs to keep that place standing. And now I'm the problem? I looked back at Mom, searching for some explanation that made sense, anything to make this feel less cruel. But all she said was, "It wasn't enough." Her voice cut like a knife. "We need the space. And frankly, it's time you grew up." That was it. No compassion. No warning. No second chance. Just ice-cold indifference. Tears started welling up, but I refused to break down in front of them. "Can I at least grab my stuff?" I asked, barely above a whisper. "It's all packed," Mom said, waving a hand toward the boxes like it was nothing. "You should go now." And that was that. Happy birthday, right? I started loading up my car, hands trembling the whole time. It didn't feel real. It felt like I'd stepped into someone else's nightmare. I wanted to yell, to cry, to ask them how they could be this heartless. But I didn't. I just kept moving, one box at a time, trying to hold myself together. When I'd packed the last of it, I turned around and looked at them one last time. I was still hoping, no, begging, that maybe they'd stop me, realize how messed up this was. "Why today? Why on my birthday?" I asked, my voice barely hanging on. Mom didn't even flinch. "Consider it our gift to you, independence." And just like that, I was out of there. On a day that should have been about celebrating, I was driving away from the only home I'd ever known. No clue where I was headed, just me and whatever I could fit in the car. I ended up at this sketchy motel, the kind with a flickering neon sign out front, spending my birthday alone. Just me, some cold fast food, and a pile of boxes staring back at me. I laid there, staring at the ceiling, wondering how people who were supposed to love me could treat me like that. How do you do that to your own kid on her birthday? That night I made a promise. I was never going to rely on them again. No matter how tough it got, I'd find my way on my own. Because clearly, I couldn't count on anyone else. After that whole birthday disaster, it felt like I'd been hit by a truck. And it wasn't just about getting kicked out, though yeah, that part sucked hard. What really hit me wasn't just getting kicked out, it was realizing the folks I thought had my back didn't actually give a damn. That night, I holed up in some grimy motel room, trying to make sense of it all, but there was no logic to be found. So the next morning, I did the only thing I knew how to do. I dove headfirst into work. I mean, what else was I supposed to do? Sitting around feeling sorry for myself wasn't gonna solve anything. I had bills piling up and, on top of that, I had to figure out where I was gonna live next. It didn't take long for my boss, Rachel, to notice something was off. I was glued to my desk at all hours, hunched over my screen, answering emails like a machine. She's sharp. Wasn't long before she called me out on it. One evening, after most folks had cleared out, she came over to my cubicle. "Casey, can we talk?" she asked, leaning casually on the side of my desk. I looked up, and judging by the look she gave me, I must have looked like I'd been through hell. "You're gonna work yourself into the ground if you keep this up. What's going on?" I didn't want to open up, not at first, but the second she asked, it all just spilled out. Told her everything. How my family tossed me out, how I was stuck in this sketchy motel, my stuff still sitting in boxes. She didn't interrupt once. Just listened, really listened, which, honestly, was more than my own family ever did. When I finally stopped talking, she let out a long sigh and said, "Why didn't you come to me sooner?" I just shrugged, feeling a little embarrassed. I mean, she's my boss, not exactly someone I'd expected to lean on emotionally. But she didn't seem bothered at all. "Listen, Casey, I've got a spare room at my place. It's nothing fancy, but it's yours if you need it while you figure things out." I just stared at her for a second. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Are you serious?" I asked, half expecting her to change her mind. But she just smiled and nodded. "Of course. I know what it's like to go through tough times. Don't worry about it." And man, I was so relieved I almost broke down again, but I managed to hold it together. "Thank you," I said quietly. "I don't even know how I'll repay you." She waved it off like it was no big deal. "Don't even think about it. You've been killing it here, and I don't want to see you burn out. Just promise me you'll take care of yourself." Just like that, I had somewhere to go. It wasn't home, not really, but it was something. The very next day, I grabbed my stuff from the motel and moved into Rachel's guest room. The room was on the small side, sure, but it was clean, warm, and peaceful. And at that point, that's all I needed. That first night, I sat on the bed, just trying to take it all in. I felt a little more stable, but deep down, there was still this empty feeling, like the foundation of my world had cracked wide open. Still, I didn't let myself dwell on it too long. I poured myself into work even harder, if that's even possible. And Rachel wasn't joking when she said she'd keep me on my toes, but honestly, I appreciated the challenge. It kept me focused. I even started picking up more freelance gigs on the side. I figured the more cash I stashed away, the sooner I could afford a place of my own. Was it easy? Not even close. There were plenty of nights where I was up till 3 in the morning, staring at my laptop, trying to crank out designs. And no matter how busy I kept myself, part of my brain always drifted back to my family. I kept hoping, maybe they'd call. Maybe they'd apologize. Maybe they'd finally realize how badly they screwed up. But nah. Nothing but silence. Through all of it, my best friend Drew was an absolute lifeline. We'd been tight since college, and even though we lived in different cities now, we never lost touch. When I told him what went down, he was pissed. "I can't believe they did that to you," he said during one of our late-night calls. "You didn't deserve that." He was right, of course. But man, it still hurt. "Yeah, well, it is what it is," I muttered. "I just gotta keep pushing forward." Drew, being the goof he is, tried to lift the mood. "You know what would really tick them off?" he said, laughing. "You getting super successful and shoving it in their faces." I laughed too, but the idea kind of stuck in my head. Not that I was out for revenge. Okay, maybe a tiny bit. But more than that, I wanted to prove, to myself, more than anyone, that I could stand on my own 2 feet. That became the goal. Work harder, save every dime, and eventually move out of Rachel's place and into a home of my own. Over the next few months, things started to shift. My design work was catching the eyes of bigger clients, and I was finally making some real money. Every sleepless night, every long weekend, I kept reminding myself it was all paying off. And truthfully, it was. Bit by bit, I was piecing my life back together. I started to believe maybe I didn't need my family the way I thought I did. Sure, it still stung, and I figured it always would, but I was showing myself that I could survive without them. More than survive, I was starting to thrive. And damn, that felt good. One day, Rachel called me into her office with this big grin plastered across her face. "Casey," she said, clearly excited, "I've got some news for you." "How does lead designer sound?" She smiled even bigger and added, "With a raise, of course." I froze. I was completely stunned. "Wait, are you serious?" I blurted out, heart racing. "Dead serious," she said with a laugh. "You've earned it. You've been doing amazing work, and it's time we recognized that." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Lead designer? Me? All the stress, the long nights, the doubt, it was finally leading somewhere. "Thank you," I said, still a little dazed. She winked and said, "Don't thank me yet. It comes with a lot more responsibility." But I didn't care. I was ready. This is exactly what I'd been grinding for. With the raise and my freelance income combined, I was finally in a position to start thinking about what came next. For real this time. I wasn't planning to live in Rachel's guest room forever, and now I could actually start apartment hunting. But this whole thing, it wasn't just about a paycheck or a title. It was about finally feeling like I had control again. After years of feeling stuck in that house, stuck under their expectations, their constant judgment, I was finally free. I was calling the shots now. Building a life that was mine and mine alone. And no one could take that from me. I was finally moving forward. And damn, it felt good. A few weeks after getting promoted to lead designer, I finally felt like things were clicking into place. I'd been grinding nonstop, stacking up cash, and even started looking into getting a place of my own. Things were finally heading in the right direction for once. But right when life starts feeling like it's going smooth, that's usually when it decides to blindside you. It kicked off on some random Wednesday afternoon. I was deep in the zone working on a big project when my phone buzzed. Figured it was just another email or notification, nothing major. But then I looked at the screen and saw a name I hadn't expected to ever see pop up again. James. My brother. The absolute last person I wanted to hear from. For a second, I just stared at his name, unsure if I should even answer. I hadn't heard a word from him, or my folks, since they booted me out on my birthday. And truthfully, I didn't miss them one bit. But curiosity got the better of me, so I swiped to answer. Hey, I said, trying to keep my tone flat. Casey, it's me, James said, and his voice sounded softer than usual. None of that usual cocky swagger. That alone caught me off guard. I know it's you, I said, already feeling the irritation creep in. What do you want? There was this long stretch of silence on the line, and for a second I thought he'd hung up. But then he spoke again, and I could hear something shaky in his voice. I need help. My eyebrows went up. I didn't buy it. James asking me for help? This was the same guy who stood by while they tossed my things onto the lawn like garbage. Right. Sure. I don't know what to tell you, I replied, my voice already tinged with anger. You all made it pretty clear I wasn't part of the family anymore. He let out a sigh. Look, I know things have been bad, but that's not what this is about. Then what is it about? I asked, not hiding my skepticism. It's about Dad. He lost his job. And Mom, she's been spending like crazy. I can't afford school anymore. And there it was. The real reason? Not about reconnecting. Not about saying sorry. It was about money. Always was. I bit down on the wave of feelings that tried to rise up. Part of me wanted to unload on him, remind him of everything they did, and just hang up. But there was still this dumb little part of me that hesitated. Because, at the end of the day, they were still my family. Or at least, they used to be. So let me get this straight, I said, sharper than I meant to sound. You call me out of nowhere after all this time because you need money? It's not just the money. He jumped in quickly. We're in a mess, Casey. You know how Mom is, she's been blowing through cash, and Dad's not handling being unemployed too well. I don't know what to do. I let out a long breath and tried to stay calm. That sounds like a you problem, James. Not mine. Come on, Casey, we're family, he said, and for the first time in years, I heard real desperation in his voice. But I wasn't falling for that. Family? I repeated, laughing bitterly. You mean the same family that tossed me out on my birthday? Family doesn't do that, man. He didn't say anything to that. Just silence. And that silence told me everything I needed to hear. I'm done being your backup plan, I said, voice steady and final. You, Mom, and Dad made your choice. So don't call me again. And before he could say another word, I hung up. My hand was shaking a little when I put the phone down. It was a weird mix of emotions, anger, sadness, and a strange kind of relief. I'd finally stood up for myself. It felt good. But it also sucked that things had come to this point. I sat there for a while, just staring blankly at the wall, trying to make sense of it all. I kept thinking about all those times I put them first, gave up things for them, bent over backwards. And where did that get me? Tossed out on the street on my damn birthday. Enough was enough. They made their decision, and now I had made mine. After that call, I buried myself back into work. I knew if I let myself think too long about it, it'd just eat me alive. So I zoned in on that project like my life depended on it. Tried to shove any thoughts of James and my parents way down. But once those memories sneak in, they're hard to shake. That night, I just laid in bed, replaying the whole conversation again and again in my head. I kept wondering, what could I have said differently? Should I have said more? Less? There was a part of me that wanted to believe they were sorry deep down. But I knew better. They didn't call because they missed me. They called because they needed something. And I wasn't about to let them use me all over again. The next morning, I woke up with a whole new kind of determination. It was time to focus on me. My work. My goals. My future. No more looking back. No more wishing things could have been different. They weren't. And that was the plain truth. From that day forward, I made myself a promise. I wasn't going to let my family hold me back anymore. I'd already been through hell, and I was finally starting to build something solid. No way I was letting them wreck that. Yeah, a piece of me still felt guilty for cutting ties, especially when they were clearly struggling. But then I'd ask myself, where were they when I was struggling? Where were they when I had nowhere to go? Exactly. I didn't owe them a damn thing. So I kept going. Kept working. Kept stacking up my savings. And every time guilt started to creep in, I'd think back to that call. They made their bed. Now they could lie in it. I wasn't their safety net anymore. And honestly, that freedom felt incredible. Eventually, I saved up enough to buy a real nice apartment. And to be honest, it was probably the best thing that had happened to me in years. One afternoon, I was deep into a new project, lost in my designs, when the doorbell rang. At first, I figured it was a delivery. I'd been ordering a bunch of new gear for my setup. But when I checked the security camera, I froze. Standing right there on my front porch were my parents. And James. My stomach twisted, like I'd been punched in the gut. They hadn't reached out since that call from James a few weeks back. I honestly thought that was the end of it. So what the hell were they doing here now? I took a long breath, trying to steady myself before I opened the door. My brain was going 100 miles an hour, spinning through every possible reason they might be standing there. Maybe they came to apologize, or maybe they just needed something. Either way, I wasn't sure which would be worse. When I finally opened the door, my mom, Linda, didn't even give me a chance to speak. She barged right in like she owned the place, her eyes sweeping over the living room like she was sizing it up. "Wow, Casey, you've really done well for yourself," she said, with this weird little smile that didn't feel like a smile at all. I just stood there, stunned. James followed her inside, looking awkward like he didn't want to be there. Then came my dad, David, shuffling in last with his hands buried in his pockets, like he wasn't sure what to do with himself. "What are you guys doing here?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. My heart was pounding, and this heavy tension was already building up inside me. I could feel it coming. I had a gut feeling this wasn't going to be a good conversation, but some part of me still hoped I was wrong. Mom turned around, that phony smile still plastered on her face. "We're here to talk about living arrangements," she said. I blinked, trying to wrap my head around that. "What?" I asked, completely thrown off. Dad cleared his throat and finally spoke for the first time since walking in. "We think it's time the family came back together." I actually almost laughed. It was so ridiculous that I thought maybe they were messing with me. "You're joking, right?" I asked, my voice thick with disbelief. Mom's fake smile faded, and she crossed her arms like I was the one being unreasonable. "No, Casey. We've talked it over and we really think it's time we all live together again, as a family." I just stared at her. I didn't even know what to say. After everything that had happened? After they kicked me out on my birthday, and now they wanted to move in with me? Before I could find the words, James jumped in with that smug tone he always used. "Oh, come on, Casey, don't be so dramatic. That's all in the past." I could feel the heat rise up in me. My blood started to boil. "All in the past?" I snapped. "You guys threw me out on my birthday. You left me with nothing. No help, no support, just gone. And now you think you can show up like nothing happened?" Mom's expression hardened, her voice cold. "We gave you the push you needed. And look at you now, you've done well because of it. You should be thanking us." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They were actually trying to take credit for everything I'd fought so hard for? All the nights I struggled, all the sacrifices I made, they wanted to act like it was all because of them? "So let me get this straight," I said. "You think you can just show up, claim credit for everything I've worked my ass off to build, and move in like it's yours? This is my home. You don't belong here." Dad stepped forward, trying to sound reasonable, trying to smooth it over. "Casey, please. Be reasonable. We're having a hard time right now. You've got all this space. We thought it might be nice, you know, to be together again." I shook my head, the anger building with every word. "You're only here because you need something. You didn't give a damn about me when I was struggling. Now you want my help? That's not how this works." Mom's face twisted in frustration. "We're your family, Casey. We sacrificed for you. Everything you have is because of us." I couldn't stay quiet anymore. "Sacrificed?" I said, my voice rising. "What did you sacrifice? You kicked me out. You turned your backs on me when I needed you the most. You threw me away like I didn't matter. And now you think you're entitled to the life I've built without you?" She opened her mouth to argue, but I wasn't done. "I've worked hard for everything I have. I built this life from nothing, without a single ounce of help from you. You don't get to walk in here and act like any of it belongs to you." James rolled his eyes, clearly annoyed. "God, Casey, stop being so selfish. We're just asking for a little help." That word, selfish, hit me like a punch to the gut. "Selfish?" I snapped. You want to talk about selfish? How about throwing me out and leaving me with nothing? How about showing up now, acting like I owe you something because you can't get your lives together? That's selfish, James, not me. Dad stepped in again, softer this time, trying to appeal to whatever he thought was left of my sympathy. Casey, please. We're just asking for a chance. I took another breath, trying to steady the storm that was raging inside me. No, I said. You don't get to do this to me again. You don't get to use me. Mom's eyes narrowed. Fine. If you want to be difficult, we'll take legal action. We have rights, you know. I stared at her, completely floored. Legal action? Legal action? Based on what? We'll find something, she said, her voice low and full of venom. Don't push me, Casey. I let out a bitter laugh. Go ahead. Try. But let me make one thing perfectly clear, this is my house. You have no right to it. You're not moving in. Not now. Not ever. For a moment, they were silent. I could see the anger bubbling up in their faces, but I didn't care. I wasn't going to back down. I walked to the front door and opened it wide. Get out, I said firmly. Now. They stood there for a second, but I didn't move. I just stood my ground and waited. Mom let out a huff and stormed past me, giving me one last hateful glare. Dad followed close behind, like he wanted to say something, but he didn't. And James? He just shook his head like I was the crazy one, and walked out without a word. As soon as the door closed, I leaned back against it, my whole body buzzing. My heart was still pounding and my hands were trembling, but at the same time, I felt lighter, like something had been lifted off my chest. I wasn't going to let them use me anymore. Not now. Not ever again. Things got quiet after that. And honestly, it was a relief. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in control of my life again, like I wasn't just waiting for everything to fall apart. But deep down, I knew they weren't finished. My mom had thrown out that legal threat, and even though I didn't think she had a leg to stand on, I couldn't shake the feeling that they'd be back somehow. A few days later, I got a call from Drew. He's one of my closest friends, and luckily for me, he also happens to be a lawyer. I'd mentioned some of what was going on, just in passing. But now that things had escalated, I figured it was time to get some real legal advice. Hey, Casey, he said when I picked up the phone. You got a minute to talk? Drew asked over the phone. I've been thinking more about your situation. Yeah, sure, I said, though my chest tightened a bit. Just the tone in his voice made me nervous. What's going on? I've been digging into your parents' situation a little deeper, he said, and his voice took on the serious edge. You mentioned they've been struggling financially, and that you're worried they might try something shady. Well, turns out, they're in even worse shape than you thought. My stomach dropped. I didn't want to hear it, but I had a feeling I needed to. What do you mean? I asked. There's a long history of money trouble, Casey. We're talking years of tax problems, a mountain of debt. It's not just about your dad losing his job or your mom spending too much. They've been burying themselves in this hole for a long time. And now that you've drawn a hard line and won't help them, they're getting desperate. I sat there in silence, trying to wrap my head around it. My mind immediately flashed back to my mom's smug threats at my front door. Her talking about legal action, like she was owed something. It all clicked. This wasn't just about asking for help. This was survival mode for them, and in their eyes, I was the exit plan. So, what do I do? I asked, feeling that all too familiar pressure weighing down on me again. Drew was quiet for a second before he replied. First thing, we need to protect you. They probably don't have a solid case, but desperate people do reckless things. You've already got proof, threats, the uninvited visit, the way they tried to manipulate you. We should file a restraining order. That'll set a legal boundary and stop them from showing up unannounced again. A restraining order? It felt like a big step. But at the same time, deep down, I knew it was the right move. They'd already shown they had no respect for my space, my boundaries, or my life. If they were willing to twist things to get what they wanted, then I needed to protect myself, no matter how extreme it felt. I'll do it, I said, with a new kind of resolve settling in. Let's file the restraining order. Drew walked me through the steps, made the process clear and simple. And a few days later, we had it in motion. It wasn't just about stopping them from coming to my house again. It was about drawing the line for good, something I probably should have done years ago. I wasn't going to let them drag me into their chaos anymore. I'd worked too damn hard to build the life I had. I wasn't about to let their mess knock me off track. But then something weird started happening. I began getting strange messages from old acquaintances. People who knew my family but hadn't talked to me in ages. At first, they were vague, asking how I was doing, if everything was okay. Then it got more obvious. Apparently, my parents were out there running their mouths, spreading lies about me, telling anyone who'd listen that I'd turned my back on them during hard times, that I was selfish, ungrateful, that they'd sacrificed everything for me and I'd left them high and dry. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The same people who kicked me out on my birthday were now playing the victim? It would have been laughable if it hadn't made me so angry. I'd rebuilt my life from scratch. I'd fought to get to where I was. And now they were out there trying to tear that down by poisoning people against me? I picked up the phone and called Drew again. "They're spreading lies," I said, trying to stay calm but hearing the frustration in my own voice. "People are reaching out to me now, asking questions." Drew didn't sound surprised. "Don't engage with it," he said. "They're counting on you to react, to try and defend yourself. That's how they pull you back in. They want you to feel cornered. Don't give them that power. If it ends up in court, we'll deal with it there. Trust me, you've got nothing to worry about." As much as I wanted to argue, I knew he was right. Every part of me wanted to go online or call people up and explain everything. To finally lay it all out, how my family treated me, what they did, and why I had every right to cut them off. But that would just feed the fire. And I didn't owe anyone an explanation, not anymore. I knew the truth. That was enough. Weeks passed, and the legal stuff moved forward. Drew was an absolute force in the courtroom, calm, sharp, and relentless. And when the restraining order was officially granted, I felt like I could finally breathe again. They couldn't come near me anymore. If they tried anything else, they'd be facing serious legal trouble. But that wasn't the end of their unraveling. Remember those financial issues Drew had warned me about? Well, turns out things were worse than we even knew. He dug deeper and found out my parents had been dodging taxes for years, hiding income, falsifying paperwork. They'd built their whole house of cards on lies, and now the IRS had finally caught wind of it. It was almost poetic, watching the same people who tried to guilt me and manipulate me now having to face the mess they made. Did I feel sorry for them? Maybe a little. But not enough to forget what they did. They made their choices. And now they had to deal with the consequences. I wasn't going to save them. Not this time. After everything settled down, I remember sitting alone in my living room one night, just staring out the window, letting it all sink in. For the first time in a long while, I felt this strange sense of peace. Closure, maybe? All those years of feeling trapped by their control, their guilt trips, their expectations. I'd finally broken free of it all. Later that night, Drew called just to check in. "How are you holding up?" he asked. "I'm good," I told him, and for the first time, I really meant it. "It's been a hell of a ride, but I'm okay now." "You did the right thing, Casey," he said. "They made their choices, and you made yours. Don't ever let them make you feel guilty for protecting yourself." I smiled a little to myself, sitting there in the quiet. He was right. I'd stood my ground. I'd finally stood up for myself. And for the first time in a long damn time, I was living life on my terms. And that felt pretty damn good.